Not
Okay,
just
first of all, mental check-in. How's everybody doing?
um, we don't have to go through that.
I got tons of soul, I'm a true collectible. Famous, also famous, number one desirable. I do what I want when I want and how I want it. Leave you with the one in the air, that's how I roll. So royal, this is me, I'm so royal.
We are back with another week's episode of In the Middle. Yeah,
Hey, hey.
girl. Look, the energy, she is coming and going, but we got a lot of things to talk about. We got a special guest with us this week, Jordan. Yay. Welcome back, Jordan. And before we get into anything, I wanted to kind of really quickly see how everybody's doing with the recent events that have happened in Atlanta and are going on right now as we record. Um, T, how you feeling? What's the T?
Um, so my city's on fire, and the black folks that are supposed to be in charge of making sure there are no fires clearly don't give a fuck about us. And so my politics will not let me sit in the house and slave any longer. So I quit my job, quit my day job. I was working as a fellow. I had about 3 to 4 more weeks left on my fellowship, and I told them I need to resign early because I am devoting 100% of my capacity, my working capacity, toward organizing and getting free in Atlanta. So because of that, I am going to be a little financially strapped. I resigned without receiving the rest of my compensation for my fellowship. Apparently, white folks say, in the interest of fairness, company policy has to be company policy, and I'm black, so there is no fairness there except for my check, my reparation. So I'm out, and yeah, so I will be propping up a couple of campaigns. Obviously, people can resource me directly at my Venmo or my Cash App, which we can drop links to those. And then I will also be starting a GoFundMe to raise the necessary amount of money that I need to get through the rest of my summer in Atlanta without getting evicted and having my lights on and eating, because apparently this world says I don't deserve that if I don't work.
Well, we are here to support you, and we're hoping that the folks who are fans of In the Middle support as well. The link will be under the description, well, in the description and at the top comment. Deshaun, you had a lot going on this weekend. Care to elaborate a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. So I went out to protest this weekend. And I've been organizing in Atlanta for 6 years now and been in the streets with a lot of niggas doing a lot of things for the last 6 years. What I experienced out there this weekend, I have literally never experienced before. And this is now Atlanta's third week of protest, which means that police they're kicking it up into high drive. And I thought they were already in high drive, but they really was not already in high drive. And so, like where I went on Saturday, was it Saturday or Friday?
It was Saturday.
It was Saturday?
It was late Saturday night.
Yes, thank you. Where I went on Saturday was really chill. It was like, it may as well have been a block party because that's how chill it was. Like nobody was really doing anything excessive. Nobody was doing anything quote unquote violent. And I mean, I pulled up ready to be on some violent shit. But it wasn't moving in that direction. But police do, because I just want to be clear that like I know for a fact that police don't have to have a reason to be violent with folks. But maybe about 30 to 45 minutes into me being there, police started warning folks that they were going to like start tear gassing us and shooting at us with rubber bullets, or so-called rubber bullets anyway. And, you know, a lot of us who were there, like, we're experienced organizers, so we're trying to, like, get white folks to create a barrier around black folks, get other folks who are there with, you know, folks that latched onto this whole Hong Kong or is it Hong Kong or is it, I don't know, one of the East Asian countries where they have, you know, done the Be Water movement. So people out there with leaf blowers and cones and all the things to really, you know, take away from the tear gas and stuff that's happening. We're really trying to get folks in line, get folks in order, make sure that the niggas protected. You know, what our good sis from Brownsville said, ISIS is the niggas. As black people, we live. So we were trying to make sure black people was live. And it was so different. White folks, I mean, of course, white folks are operating in their own whiteness. And so does whiteness ever listen? It don't. It can't. But, you know, there was one white person who responded to Hunter with like, don't tell me what to do. We're all in this together. Like,
now
we're not all in this together. You're out here because of Black Death, so we're not in this together. So what you need to do is what's being told to you to do. One non-Black Latinx person came up to us and was like, you know, well, I can't like, you know, try to be a barrier because I'm not documented and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, heard you, sis. So then we weren't talking to you. So move around. Like, I don't know, like, we don't actually have time to be your therapist in the middle of what's about to be a real big moment, right? Like, it was a lot of things moving at once. I don't know, like there was really no moment to like collect myself before I realized that I was like having to run because I had just been tear gassed. Like, I never hype up no white folks, but T can speak to this. When we was organizing with the white folks that was down between 2014, 2017,
listen,
it was
my rise up comrades rose the fuck up. Okay?
They were doing what the fuck they had to do. The folks out there this weekend, there was the non-Black niggas that I organized with were the only ones who actually stayed around to throw tear gas back to make sure that they were the ones hit the hardest, that they were getting Black folks out. The rest of the white folks that was out there, the rest of the non-Black folks that was out there, they was gone quicker than us. There was no barrier. There was no protection. And I think that's, of course, symbolic of a lot of other things, that there is no protection for Blackness and there is no protection for Black folks and all the things. But in that moment, like, we were the ones being tear gassed. We were the ones being shot at with rubber bullets, right? White folks were running away. Non-Black folks were running away. They were shooting firecrackers at the police, right? Like,
the absolute ghetto.
Now there was some non-Black folks who were shooting firecrackers away from police to try to. I actually don't really know what the logic behind that is. But the idea was that it was supposed to like distract police or something. LOL, I don't know. But all I know is that I'm still like coughing from tear gas and still like recovering from the tear gas. My body still feels the effects of what I felt this weekend. And I went out again on Sunday like a dummy. But I'm not built like I was when I was organizing before. And then what they're doing right now is not what we experienced then. This is the longest moment of unrest that Atlanta has experienced in my organizing history. So like, when I say that like police are out here with their Humvees and their Bearcats and their bikes and horses and scooters and all the like big ass buses, they're using MARTA buses, right? Like MARTA is transporting a ton of Black ass people throughout the day to their destinations, and then at night being used as more buses to haul Black folks off to jail, right? Like that's what's happening in the middle of Atlanta. I ended up running away to get away from the tear gas, get away from the rubber bullets, like literally watching these bullets fly past us. And I got separated from my folks. I was out there. I'm not going to name names, but I was out there with a bunch of folks and got separated from folks at one point. Police had barriers set up at least 3 blocks away from where we actually were, right? So they were literally chasing us around the neighborhood. To try to give folks a visual, I've been telling folks that, like, it was almost as if you remember, you playing like a game of cops and robbers as a kid in your local neighborhood, right? Except this was not fun, and this was actual cops, and we were not robbers, but like we were running that excessively. We were running that far away. Like every time you thought you were done running, you were no longer running. Somebody described it, and Jordan's gonna love this. Someone described it as like a slave getaway, as like police was chasing the niggas trying to catch the slave. And I thought that was just a funny ass description for it, because that's exactly what it felt like. And it was like there was no escape. The farther away we got, they were still just behind us. And at one point, I got onto a street by myself, and there were 2 police officers behind me. And what a lot of folks may not know in this moment, like there was 2 or 3 years ago, I went to a protest that I did not organize with one of my friends, Avery, and we were on the street. It was just the 2 of us and 2 officers. We walked past 2 officers, and I heard them say to each other, "Oh, look, there goes Deshaun and Avery," right? So like, these are police officers that know us by name. Now, I don't know if they are doing like a history 101 in their offices before they go out to protest this year or whatever. I don't know what's happening. But what I do know is that I didn't have time to know whether or not they knew who I was. Because even if they didn't know who I was, I'm still a nigga. And I was by myself. So I had to like find like strategic ways to dodge the police who were behind me, because obviously I didn't have any weaponry on me. I didn't have anything on me to protect my own self. And they had rubber bullets and tear gas. So I literally like was hiding in bushes and hiding behind houses and dodge, like zigzag in between homes and all this good stuff, right? Like all this stuff happening. Meanwhile, I have a heart condition in the middle of fucking COVID and trying to protect myself from anything that serious too, because I also have asthma. Which is why I'm still feeling the effects of the tear gas 2 days afterwards. But it was horrifying, and I've never felt powerless at a protest before. But being in that moment, I felt like it was clear that the police had power of that space. They had complete control of that space, and there was nothing that we could have done to change that. It literally felt like I was reenacting a scene of The Purge. That's how like dramatic and traumatizing it was. At one point I went live on Twitter, and you can literally hear in the background like the gunshots that were ringing off and the fireworks that were ringing off while I'm on live trying to like find people that I was with. Eventually we did connect together. One of my folks was hurt. I had to like we had to pick them up to run away because there were still police chasing us. It was a lot. And all I know is that we are literally fighting against the most armed and militarized police in the world. And folks on the ground really, really, really need our attention, and really, really need really need white and non-Black folks like money to fund the resources that we need to protect ourselves while we're on the streets, because that was something I had not experienced before.
So the incident of Ray Shard happened, when was it, Friday?
Thursday night, wasn't it?
Was it Thursday night?
Richard, that was Friday morning. It
Yeah.
was like he was shot like in the night, but like everything rang out around like 12 something that morning.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
it was Friday night at 10:30. He was shot in the Wendy's parking lot. The people never left Wendy's parking lot. Folks were coming in shifts and droves. There was a somewhat, air quote, organized action supposed to take place both at the Wendy's and at Centennial Park. Shout out to our comrades at TPR ATL, especially Hunty, for the lovely map graphic that really lays out why the fuck you should not protest in Centennial Park, because the militarized pigs have been kettling or trapping. They've been trapping protesters in the park and brutalizing them. If you know anything about Centennial Park, it's completely round, it's fenced off, and there are certain exits in strategic places, and it sits in the heart of the city of Atlanta, in the middle of a street grid. We know cities are designed on a grid to deploy police to stop uprising, word to Paris in the 1800s. And so Atlanta's heartbeat of this sort of reaction from the police is Centennial. So after that action at Centennial dissipated on Saturday, then things escalated quickly at Wendy's.
It happened Friday. Well, the incident happened Friday.
Right. And the events I'm talking about were all day Saturday. And so Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, and late into the night, folks escalated. The police fucking escalated against the people, to the point where I think I might have been the only one from TPR who hadn't left the house and was holding down digital strategy by the end of the night. It was a very scary time to see that many of my folks on the ground, especially after the people lit the Wendy's on fire and the gas station next to the Wendy's caught on fire. And the police, the way that they were handling protesters, basically trapped some folks in. It wasn't easy to navigate in and out. And mass arrests were happening, snatch and grabs were happening. Atlanta's arrest numbers are fucking horrendous. That is a leg of the work that I'm looking to plug into now, is jail support, jail vigil. Shout out to everybody who donated to the Atlanta Solidarity Fund. It is the overall bail fund for the city. It's atlsolidarity.org. Please keep throwing money in. It would be lovely if you tweeted out how much you put in there and ask people to match you, because this moment is going to last until we get free, until Keisha actually defunds the police, until APD is abolished. And honestly and truly, it shouldn't stop with just APD, because we know Atlanta got about 20 police jurisdictions at any time, from all of the universities, the World Congress Center, the state capitol. Everybody has their own police force. Even the neighborhood business districts have privatized police that the wealthy, that folks fund to protect their capital interests. And so until all of that's gone, niggas is burning Atlanta down, building by building. So yeah, the Rayshard Brooks incident really set it the fuck back off in Atlanta this weekend.
Yeah, and I think that things were starting to kind of like tone down a little bit, and I was up when it happened, and I actually got caught up in the interstate. I don't know what parts, I don't know Atlanta like that, but I was stuck on the interstate, and I was like, oh my gosh, like the interstate is like blocked off. Like Google literally told me, girl, it's gonna be about an hour before you get anywhere. And I was like, probably like a couple of miles from the house. I had to cut across the grass to go down. I took a picture of it and I shared it on Twitter. And I had a lot of white people comment, and I was like, where y'all come from? Like, but I forgot I used the Atlanta, I had tweeted it on the Atlanta protest tweets. Mm-hmm. And some people thought that I was saying that they need to get out the way. I had to put out a statement after that and said, girl, no, I have no problem with, them shutting the interstate down. I just did what I had to do and cut across. So I had to turn my car off for a minute and let the girls do their work. But I had no issue with anything. I said, let me hold up, because I don't want y'all to think that I'm inconvenienced from getting in the house. I was like, go, girl, do what you need to do. If I need to cut this way for y'all to tear stuff up, let me watch my lane and get to the house. But Jordan, you're not in Atlanta anymore. So what was your whole thoughts about what's been going on recently and this past weekend?
Yeah, I'm actually really sad and yeah, I'll just say sad that I'm not in Atlanta. I'm actually making arrangements to come to Atlanta because classes are officially over, and I think that I would be remiss if I wasn't doing more than what I am now, especially with the time that I have. So watching it from where I've been, it has been a little bit, it's been very interesting because I think what I've been most curious or intrigued by is both how organizing is changing in this moment, which these testimonies have obviously proven. And I think the fact that, you know, there's been a viral video of Angela Davis every day for a week kind of is also a way to measure that. The fact that, you know, Mariam Kaba has a NYT opinion piece, you know, there are things that are happening in the zeitgeist that is shifting in terms of abolitionism. And so that's been very interesting to see that at the height of that the cost of for abolitionism to become a conversation, black blood has to be shed. So that's been one thing that's been really interesting for me. And then the other part has been what is or is not a mournable body. And so I've been really interested in what comes together in the cultural unconscious for George Floyd to be the symbol for endurability and direct erasure of Breonna Taylor and direct erasure of so many other names I could continue to add on the list. So I think those two things have been has preoccupied my mind the most, because the place that I sit from it is a very weird Baldwinian type place where it's like I'm just sitting in this room with my partner and I'm like on the phone looking at people and trying to organize thoughts about what's happening on the ground. And these kind of relations seem to be the steady ones. This kind of intense relationship between a rise in abolitionism and Black death, which is not a unique one. And also this figuring of endurability that continues to be cis heterosexist, that continues to be trans misogynoristic. And so how to reckon with, I'm trying to think about different ways of reckoning with that right now.
We just, this past weekend, we 2 Black trans women were killed. Yeah. And one was I'm reading it right now, I'm saying that name correctly, Rhea Milton, Remy, in Ohio, and
Philadelphia.
What was the other one, Deshaun?
Philadelphia.
Yes. So, yeah.
That was part of the reason why I chose to go out.
Yeah.
That's still part of the reason why what?
It was part of the reason why I chose to go out on this past weekend, because I heard about those 2 early Friday morning. Like super early. Like I was on Twitter just scrolling, and weirdly enough, because for the last 2 weeks, I really have been like on go consistently. Like, but that Thursday night, moving into Friday, you know, like things kind of felt a little more regular, whatever that looks like. And I was like, I had just finished listening to the new Chloe and Halle album, and that's when I heard about Remy, and I was like, this can't be like a thing. This cannot be a thing. And then I woke up that next morning and heard also about Raya. And with those two on top of Rashard later on that night, I was like, oh, bitch, that's it for me. I know I'm putting myself at risk of a lot of things going on here, but I done sat through Nina Pop and motherfucking Tony McDade and motherfucking George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all these other names I done digitally organized around. I'm going to the street. I'm putting all this shit in my body right now. So that's actually, those two led me to that moment.
And also there has been a Black activist in Tallahassee, Florida, who was found dead, who was an activist, if I'm not mistaken, who had videos of her saying that I'm going to probably die from this, like speaking about death. And they had a conversation about the things that they were experiencing, not having support, dealing with sexual assault, abuse, and that was some of their last tweets. So I'm glad that we have Jordan here because I know Jordan wanted to talk about the lack of protection when we talk about Black Lives Matter and how Black trans folks are not being protected. Black women are not being protected, and we are seeing this. And also, she was dark skinned, and I think a lot of things, happen. I don't want to say I'm burnt out, but I will not say that I am. Like, it has taken a toll to see this to the point that I can't even remember names. And that's weird for me because I normally would know, but I can't keep up. I can't keep up with all of the Black death that is going on. Jordan, did you want to add anything from the story? Did anyone know, anybody that knew the Black activist that was killed in Tallahassee?
Olatoyin Salau. Yeah.
Okay. How you pronounce the name again?
So their full name is Olawatoyin Salau.
Okay.
Or
Yeah.
Toyin Salau.
Yeah, I was seeing Toyin on Twitter. I wasn't.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who knew her.
I don't either. But, the thing about it, it's amazing how these moments make people into what we imagine them to have been based off of the snapshots that we get of who they were when all the attention is on them. It forces us to find their archive in a way and to extrapolate a story of who they were. And so I'm careful to call her or them an activist because I don't know if that was their charge. I know that they were seen at actions. I know that they, like me, are a survivor. I know that they were holding it down, especially for the Black trans death that have been lost and the Black women that have been lost. But I only know that based off of the videos that I see, the snapshots from the Twitter that I see. And it's like, I don't even, to say her life mattered, I don't even know what that means for me anymore. To say that, because the whole idea of Black life mattering has become this trademark, this TM. It's been co-opted for commemoration. It has been used to put the stamp of approval on reforms that we're not asking for. And I feel a way in this moment because finding out about Toyin's death has completely taken the wind out of my sails today. I mean, last night and this weekend, I had a lot of anxiety just from all of the other shit that had happened prior to this moment, saying, I have no idea how I'm supposed to go to work on Monday. I know that there's no deliverable that can get done. And finding that out, I was like, I absolutely cannot work while these things are happening. Like, I refuse. The only work that I'm interested in doing is abolishing the systems that make this possible, that made her death possible, and that makes her memory snapshots and some online archive that never can speak to who she might have been. It's heavy.
So in Atlanta now, we have the chief of police, Erica, has resigned. And Deshaun, you were mentioning that, or I think there was UT that mentioned that they're being replaced by someone.
It was me.
Someone who used to work at a jail, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, yes, but he was trained through the Gilly program.
Okay.
Which I think we talked about this on the last episode, or maybe not, but the Gilly program pretty much sends APD officers to Israel to be trained by Israelis who are currently occupying Palestinian land and leading Israeli apartheid.
Yes.
So,
and the Gilly, if it wasn't already violent enough, the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange Program is a flagship program of my alma mater collegiate institution, Georgia State University. It is housed in the Andrew Young School of Policy Studies at the neoliberal policy institution that is GSU. It is a program that the university, holds, it evaluates, and it continues to, prop up. And if you go on their website, it's a big ass donations button, as if it's not already funded enough. So, when we say abolition, it's not just the police. We have to think about how all of these things are interconnected, and allows for this violence to continue to persist.
Deshaun, did you have anything to add? I feel like a lot of us are like really, really. Jordan, you had something to offer?
I don't want to cut you off, Deshaun.
No, go ahead.
No, but yeah, to T's point about not just the police, like that's a perfect way to talk about, like, when I say abolition, I just want to, because I can't say we, because again, to my earlier point, the way abolitionism has been becoming popular is not necessarily in complete congruence with how I understand abolition. So when I say abolition, I mean abolition of the world. And I think that the fact that APD is going to Israel to be trained, Israel, and I use that term very specifically. I said Israel very, very intentionally. Right. It's going to Israel to be trained. Suggest to us, at least, that this issue is a global one, right? And this is something that Angela Davis talks about most explicitly in Freedom is a Constant Struggle, right? The relationship between BLM and Palestine, or like Black and Palestinian solidarity. But I think what I want to put pressure on or re-emphasize or come at in a different way is that solidarity politics is important only if we can both agree that abolition doesn't stop when the police are no longer in existence, which would mean that Israeli apartheid, Palestinian apartheid is not a thing, right? Like that they are completely demilitarized and all imperial forces are ostensibly out of play in that region. I think that does not guarantee liberation for Black people. Precisely because of the relationship between what's happening there and what's happening here, right? And we know that if what's happening here is, if the condition of possibility for what's happening here is what's going on there, then we know that the way in which Black people are being treated there is congruent with the way in which Black people are being treated here. And that means they're both being treated like slaves, full stop.
Yep.
And so the answer to a slave is not only the destruction of the police. Or the answer to a slave is the destruction of a world that can produce enslavement. A world that can produce enslavement does not stop at police. Because police are the insurance of slavery. They are not slavery in and of themselves, right? So, and that goes all the way back to like material Ruth Wilson Gilmore lessons on how the slave patrol became the police. The slave patrol became the police after, and specifically after slaves were emancipated. That's when they became even more militarized. So rebellious property were already rebellious when the slave patrol happened, which means they were already property. That means that slavery had already had to have been in place for the idea, for the notion of policing and for the bodies, entities of police force to exist. So with the abolition of police, we have to also talk about the abolition of the conditions that necessitate police. And slavery is that condition. So we need to talk about what's happening to Black Palestinians. We need to talk about what's happening to Black people, Black Asians, Black Japanese folks, to be very specific, right? If we want to talk about all these different regions in which the police have been leveled against, but the ending of the police does not solve the issue for them, right? And I think Toyin is a great example for another reason why the police, ending the police is not where this abolition ends, where this call to abolition ends. And I think that that has not been talked about enough. Yeah.
I love that because, y'all, it's really my best friend. He is. I think that's absolutely correct. And you know, like Mark says, I think we use a very different language. But I really think that the end is always, not always, but in many ways is the same. And I think that is exactly to say, like, you know, I wrote a statement for one of my jobs after the murder of Tony McDade, and after Ayanna Diora was beaten, and talked about how the reason for why abolition is necessary is because Tony McDade being able to be murdered by police, and her, Ayanna Diora, being able to be beaten by mostly cis men and cis women, only exist as two sides of the same coin. In that the state produces that type of violence that leads to transmisogynoir, as well as cis sexism, as well as anti-Blackness. And to abolish one without the other only means that more Tony McDade's, or that more Ayanna Diora's are beaten, while Tony McDade is murdered by somebody that's not the police, right? Like, and that's too important to name, right? It's too important that we are talking through and talking about what abolition looks like outside of just a physical police force or a physical prison wall, right? Like what it means to be talking through and talking about figurative prisons. And speaking of like Palestine, right? Like Palestine is the largest open air prison in that Palestinians exist in a prison that is wallless, but that is a prison continuously and always, right? Like, so what does it mean for us to say, well, we're prison abolitionists, but our prisons only are abolished as actual physical places, right? That still means that there's still Black Palestinians locked up behind Israeli power because they're existing under an open air prison. And so I think to the point that both Jordan and T were making earlier, right? this is where it becomes this idea where Breonna Taylor is only mourned by people who care enough about Black women to mourn their lost lives, right? Because we're abolitionists insofar as we understand who was being murdered, right? And we only understand who was being murdered by what's being taught as important, who's being taught as important, who is being seen as valued. And if you are valued, and I also want to be clear that value as it relates to who is dead is not real value, but we're only being taught about who was valued by way of who is dead, right? And who is dead is always only ever cishet men. Mm-hmm. So if we're not valuing, if we don't really see abolition as something that extends beyond who is valued, or that extends beyond who we see as dead, right? Then we cannot see Breonna Taylor as a person, as a woman, as a being who can actually be dead, or whose life is worth mourning as in her death, right? Because she is not a cishet man, and therefore she and Tony McDade and Nina Pop and Remy and Rhea, all these people who are murdered by police and by other folks in our community, Toyin, right, are not valued because abolition only extends to police and physical prisons, and therefore the rest of us are lost in the sea.
Yes, I love Deshaun's points on expanding the way that we think about a prison, and the geography of an imprisoned space, like you described, is we can't erase the way that Atlanta itself is very much, as a city, a prison for Black folks. And when you talk about what is of value and what is imperative to be protected in such a city, even with a Black woman as the head, or as the CNN panel on Sunday night showed us, you know, as many of these cities that are now on fire are being headed by Black women. So Washington, D.C., Chicago, and San Francisco all have Black women at the helm. All of them are being seen as those who are leading the charge for racial justice. And yet and still, their excuses for their failure to heed the call of abolition, Keisha Lance Bottoms and any of the other mayors of these cities can never truly give us abolition as long as they occupy the space of the mayor. Because the way that the city, as in my mind, you know, some people call it an extension of the plantation. I'm these days thinking of it as plantation reform, as another iteration of it. In the way the hierarchy works, in the way that property is monitored, the way that for the plantation, the climate was so important that it was always important to monitor, to make sure that all the conditions were right, to make sure that productivity, that capital flows were always optimal, were always ideal, were always yielding the most profit to continue to persist, to make that plantation persist. The same thing is happening with Atlanta, with all of our cities right now. The mayors and their police forces, as those who are there to protect capital first, people second, or people, I don't even think people exist on that list unless we're just talking about white elites who get to be people. Mm-hmm. It's wild for us to think that abolition can happen just from relieving ourselves of police forces, and yet the billionaire and multimillionaire elites still exist. The office of the mayor still exists. The city council itself exists. The city itself exists. And people looked at me left, right, and center when I said, this shit don't end until we literally abolish Atlanta as we know it, the city as we know it, the city as entity that contains nothing but concentration of accumulated capital that allows for Black life, Black death, the culture that emerges from the way one sun rises and the other one sets, right? The culture that is left between that, allow that to be the packaging, that all you get to see is Black people in a Mecca, that all you get to see is Black woman at head, and therefore Black woman as matriarch protecting her sons, her because she never names daughters, right? It's always, I'm a mother of sons, and even I can't stop the police from killing them. And it's very eerie when on one hand you have what's happening to, you know, Toyin and, you know, everyone else who is marginalized, not even being named, not even being emphasized. And still the Black women at the head of these cities only name Black men, only name Black sons, and only name the cities as masculine capitalist institutions that they are the head of to protect as what is at stake when we talk about abolition here. It is all about protecting what is masculine, what is capable of capital, what is capable of value. And Black death is what ensures that that cycle continues. And so we have to think about our cities themselves as prisons and what needs to be abolished beyond just the police forces that protect it.
Do you all think that recently, given everything that's been happening, that folks are starting to see Atlanta differently? Like the veil has been lifted a little bit?
No.
I'm starting to see that a little bit on social media because, like, I'm starting to see that because y'all FaZe was saying that Atlanta is the Wakanda and we need to protect it. Now you have T.I. out here hugging folks, hugging a Black woman who lost her husband to police brutality. So it's just the shit y'all were saying 2 weeks ago when y'all was saying he was running around on the brown liquor tearing up shit for no reason exists even in Atlanta. Because I think before then there wasn't any recent police brutality that we were aware of in Atlanta before George Floyd happened. But now, like Atlanta was like every night it was some heat, it was some shit going on, like every night. Now it's the illusion of what Atlanta was is starting to be dissipating.
I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the TIs of the world would continue to. T.I. can go out and hug that woman who lost her husband, and still find a way to separate that moment from Atlanta being the Wakanda.
Absolutely.
Because that is his commitment.
Nicely.
That is T.I.'s commitment to seeing value in the city, seeing value even in police, right? Like there's a commitment that T.I. has with all the years of violence that he's experienced at the hands of the police state, right?
He's literally a trap nigga.
A felon. Like, this is a nigga who's been in prison, who's been targeted by police. The same APD out here who just murdered Rashard Brooks, right?
The whole Red Dogs is what he wrote his first 3 albums on.
One of his best albums came right leading up to his moment in prison. Like, Paper Trail, baby, T.I., let me tell you.
Revolutionary music.
Help you remember who you are, because maybe you don't remember who you are.
Revolutionary.
You went to prison, okay? Like, you had a whole TV show that was counting down the days to your prison sentence, right? Like, you had to release Paper Trail early because you were going to prison, right? Like, this is T.I.'s experience, right? But T.I. is a capitalist. T.I. is a nigga who wants to be invested in the establishment, who wants to be invested in some way in being able to uphold, maintain, complete a thing that's not incomplete, or that's not incomplete, right? But who wants to complete like the state as it is. And so he's not going to he can hug her and offer condolences to her, and we'll still say this is Wakanda, and this is not how we respond to police violence, because police violence is isolated. Police violence, it's what happened to Rashard is not who Atlanta is. It's not what APD does, even though we know for a fact that just in the last year alone, the 5th murder that we know of from APD, right? We know of Jimmy Atchison, and we know of Dietrich, and we know of all these other, we know of Alexia Christian, and we know of all these other folks who in the last 5 years, police in Atlanta have murdered, right? There's name after name, Oscar Kane, Kane Rogers, Jamarian Robinson, Anthony Hill, all these names of people that we know that were murdered by APD, right? So like, but that doesn't matter because this has to be isolated. In order for this to be something that we can hold on to, this has to be something separate from a systemic issue, an issue that is only allowed to be because it exists itself, right? There's no way that T.I. or anyone who is like T.I. will reckon with that, which is why Keisha Lance Bottoms can hop her bum ass on TV every fucking day and talk about how she can't save her black ass son from dying, but then thinks that getting rid of a police chief and reassigning her to a different position and getting rid of 19 police officers will be enough to end police violence in Atlanta.
Oh,
the cognitive dissonance doesn't work for me. It doesn't make sense for me. It's like, baby, you hopped on this stage and you just said that you can't protect your black son from dying in the city that you're a mayor of, but you still think that there's something that you can do to save the police force. What's not clicking?
What's not clicking?
What is the point, sis? At what point?
So you don't think that people are starting to see that Atlanta really ain't that girl? Like, just even a little bit. I think definitely it's going to be an uphill battle. Like, but I think folks are starting to realize that, girl, this is what y'all got going on in Atlanta. Like, a lot of people, I've been seeing some folks who I actually shocked that they even commented on it, saying that, oh, girl, like I'm starting to see a lot of folks who are not with this shit. Like, girl, this shit is really, really fucked up. Even folks who I like talked to recently who did not believe in abolishing the police, did not believe in any of that. Like, girl, I'm not gonna make it. Like, this shit is everywhere. It's in different areas. Like, this shit can't fucking, like, this is some professional shit, because it is some professional shit. Like, that's why we can't clean it up, girl. Like, I just had a really great conversation with one of my friends who's a professor at Howard, and she considers herself as a liberal. But she says, sis, I'm a whole professor and I can't find a job. Like, all of this shit going on, and maybe capitalism is fucking fucked up. Like, maybe I need to die. Maybe I need to turn the heat up a little bit, because the preheat was enough. I need to put that home 375. Like, I'm starting to see folks. Like, I know that this is the work, this is PR work that Keisha Lance Bottoms is doing, because her tone is different than it was 2 weeks ago. We were just running around on the brown liquor some weeks ago. She was going in on us, dragging the dog shut-ups. Now it's, I hear you. She started with her marching with the protesters, talking to them for a few minutes. They cussed her ass out. They called her ass a coon in her own house, told her to come outside. So she like, you know what? Maybe I need to tone down a little bit. Maybe I need to talk with them. Because she ain't never dealt with no shit like this. I think she's really trying to wrestle with why folks don't like her ass right now. Like, am I doing something wrong? Like, why me? Like, why y'all giving me this heat? Like, I'm Keisha Lance Bottoms. Like, y'all like my last name. So why y'all treating me like this? But y'all been known.
I've never met somebody who does not know how to read the room the way Keisha fails to do any reading, but really fails to read the room. I mean, we've had standoffs and face-to-face spitfire arguments with her predecessor, Kasim, and he sits there in all his shit in glory. And it's just like, she's so romanticized by the image of Atlanta. She has bought so much stock into the value that is what we know as Atlanta, that she really cannot divorce herself from that regime. It's I want to say it's sad, but like, the way that I feel about her, I don't have any grief. Like, I really want her gone, like, eliminated. And we don't want another mayor. This isn't about a fucking vote. This isn't about next November. Like, you know, people are starting to have those whispers that, oh, Atlanta has an election next November, that, you know, it's most of the city council seats will be up for grabs again. Child, we did that 4 years ago. We told you then. We let you know that Joyce, that Cleta, that Carla, that Keisha, that Andrea, that all of them motherfuckers that sit on that council and all of the capitalists that have them bought off are never going to be in your interest. We've watched them vote in favor of development after people have given hours and hours of public comment, after the people have done their work for them, after we've written the policy. Fuck policy. Policy and police have only one word that is different. That's why I don't fuck with that field. I mean, the policy is anti-blackness, and there is nothing that you can write in the annals of American law and logic that can undo that until we eliminate America itself. So don't come at me and say we need a task force to think about policy. Her literal language was, we're going to start a task force that examines the use of excessive force. And my response to that is, we examine excessive force every time we watch these fucking videos, every time we go to the fucking protest, every time we go to the city council meeting and we get violently put out by the police. Because I know the times that I have taken arrests, it has been at City Hall. It ain't even been in the streets. Literally. We have been removed more than once forcibly and have had to raise bail funds to get niggas out for going to City Hall and being civically engaged. I'm not engaging civically with these motherfuckers. All of it gotta go. And so as long as folks think that we can vote in something different, that we can elect another governance committee, that community oversight's gonna fix it, you're just buying into the myth that a city can work in favor of people when a city can literally only work in the interest of capital. That is what a city is. And so if you're not interested in abolishing it all, what are we even talking about?
What was the reason?
I think that I'm not the best reader of Du Bois, and I'm also not an Atlanta historian. But I think that Du Bois says this in this was a black folks.
Atlanta, the golden apples.
Yeah,
it's still apparent. He said black people in Atlanta have a space to be revolutionary, but y'all gonna keep chasing the golden apple.
Literally, On the Wings of Atalanta is a beautiful essay by Du Bois that was written in 1903.
Literally.
About the way in which black people in Atlanta seek and chase after capitalist incorporation. and so I think that is still true. And I think that the nostalgia for an Auburn Avenue is what keeps black people, but specifically in Atlanta, but black people in general, because the nostalgia for Auburn Avenue is not that different from the nostalgia for Black Wall Street, right? And all these other places that, black people were affluent and light-skinned. So, so I think that people are unable to divorce or to see the relationship between an Auburn Avenue and the creation of a happy slave.
Right.
Come on now.
So I think that until we get to a place where we begin to critique, in the first instance, all the ways in which capitalism has conceded to the slave in order to convince it that it has its best interest at heart,
right,
that we will never get to the kind of abolitionist politic necessary to destroy and abolish the city of Atlanta, which is just, again, a case study, an emblematic figure for the more general ways in which cities are developed all across America, in the name of Blackness, right? In the name of the quote unquote chocolate city. And that's his work. So I don't want to talk out of turn, but we know that, Philly and Chicago and all these places were supposed to be, zones of possibility for Black people, and they ended up only being open air prisons, to be very specific to how the cultural historian City Hartman might talk about it. So I think we need to be very, very. This conversation for me has been very important in pushing the language of abolition to its highest level of abstraction, which is to say its most fundamental, radical, rooted limits. And I think that a lot of people want to divorce this kind of more paradigmatic critique, where it's like, actually, we need to abolish the city. Like, we need to abolish the way in which America functions, because they want to make that seem abstract or make that seem not material. But I think that this, but I think this conversation has gone to show that, like, the abolition of the city as such, the abolition of the state apparatus, is inextricable from the kind of quotidian ways of which Black people engage or think they are engaged within the city.
For the conversation on just police, I know this is going to be one of the things where y'all gonna look at me crazy, but I'm asking for the people who do want to know. For those back home.
I know what you're coming with, girl. Go ahead.
Do you? What you think I'm about to say?
The military.
Oh, girl. See, you always think up for the good on that, girl. I've been told the girls fuck that shit and all that. Like, I've been said that. So you're not going to see me necessarily defend that. But I was going to ask, for those who have been very adamant on talking about what happens after we abolish the police.
Yes.
I've been getting that a lot. That's the conversation that is happening. I
think this is where Jordan and I.
Ooh.
I think.
Okay. Well, who wants to go first in talking about that? I think
I really want them to talk about it first.
Okay. So let's end on that. And I think we need a specific episode on just what happens next, because, girl, y'all saying abolish everything. The city, state, United States. It's just like, what's gonna be left, girl? What we gonna be able to do? I ain't gonna be able to go to the club. I ain't gonna be able to go to the Marquette. Are we gonna abolish that too?
We abolished her first. We abolished her first.
Burn her down right after Morehouse. Like,
right.
Right after Morehouse, burn the Marquette.
Like, even y'all alumni folks and y'all folks who going are looking at y'all crazy for wanting to abolish the AUC and Morehouse. Like,
girl, they tried to put me to the Morehouse Police Department. So
was that protesting with the Morehouse Police Department?
No, because I said I'll be the one to light the match.
Well, Jordan, how many followers have you lost from talking about abolishing Morehouse? And
I don't keep up.
But Deshaun, what happens when if we get rid of police? Like, what are you going to do? Like, how am I going to be protected when I'm driving and someone robs me? Like, what's going to happen? Like, if we don't have a police department anymore?
Well, so I think that question is already faulty. The premise is faulty, right?
Oh no.
Because not the smirk. I think the premise is faulty because the very reason why we're even talking, I think this goes back to what Jordan just named. The reason for why we're talking about abolition is because it cannot stop at police, because that happens, right? Because we do continue to have the gender-based violence and the sexual violence and all these things that continue to happen and function as a piece of the state, as a byproduct of anti-Blackness and capitalism, right? But the reason why I say that, but the answer that I would give to a person who asks that question, right? Because I know that means that they are not at a place where they're talking about abolishing anti-Blackness, which abolishes the world. The thing that I would say back to that is I would ask them how often they've called the police in their life, right? Because when I think about how often I've called the police in my life, I realize I've never called the police. I have never called the police. Come close. I have never called the police. And I realize that a lot of Black folks have never called the police, right? We have somehow lived through 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years without calling the police. But white supremacy, anti-Blackness, capitalism indoctrinates us into believing that police are there to protect us, and therefore they must be an option for us to call, even though we've never had to call them, right? But I would ask beyond that, if you have called the police, because we know that there has been some folks who have called the police, how helpful has the police been to you?
Come on now.
Right? When you called the police about that robbery, did they get your stuff back?
Did you get the big house?
Did you get the house? Did you get the job? Did you get the guy? Did your house get any bigger? What did you get when you tore that woman down?
Oh, I
want to know that. But the thing is, and I know that kind of it flattens the question. It really, I think, it reduces or kind of toys with or makes trivial people's concerns, right? And I understand that. So I don't want to joke about people's concerns, but I do want to really want us all to interrogate how police have been helpful, right? When we're calling police in response to being assaulted, right? We know that only 2% of the folks who have been what's the word I'm looking for, y'all? Not charged. I can't think of the word, but only 2% of the folks who have been like
Accused?
Accused, yes, thank you so much. I don't know why that word escaped me. With rape or with any sort of sexual violence are sitting in prison, which means that 98% of folks who have been accused are roaming the streets, right? But going further than that, we also know that 97% of the people who sit in the people who sit in prison are in there because they cannot afford bail, right? So what does it look like when most of our prisons are filled with people who are not rapists, who are not murderers, who are not super violent people, but that those folks are the ones who are existing on the streets, right? So what does it mean for us to then abolish poverty by abolishing capitalism and working through what it looks like and what it has looked like, even under this carceral state, this police state, for us to have been able to find restorative works, restorative practices to keep ourselves safe within our own communities, right? Like thinking of calling on Cousin Bobby and Cousin Pookie as a restorative practice, as an abolitionist practice, right? As a transformative practice, right? What has it meant for us what does street justice look like, right? What does it mean? And I also want to be very, very clear that I believe in a world without rape, and I believe in a world without murder, and I believe in a world without burglary, and I believe in a world without all of these violent acts, right? I really do believe that so much of this is a byproduct of capitalism, that there is a possibility that there does exist a place, whether it's Earth or not, where we don't have to experience these violences that comes after abolition. But so my question just continues to go back to, when have you called them? And when you did call them, how were they helpful? And the answer is that they were not helpful. Almost always is that they were not helpful, and that you calling them was almost a waste of your time, right? Because they did not benefit you in any way. So now what has to happen is that there has to be an imagination of some sort that brings us to imagining what it looks like to implement and build out and create our own restorative practices that are unique to our communities, that hold folks accountable, that hold folks to a restorative practice and a restorative justice, right? That allows us to move to the other side of a moment that doesn't recapitulate or reify this like punitive carceral punishment that we are taught has to be a response to any form of harm and abuse. And that will always look like something that's not the police. That will always look like something that's not prisons. That will always look like something that's not gender. That's not sexuality. That's not race, right? That's not class. And that means that we are always, Angela Davis, she said a lot of brilliant things. But I think, and I know Jordan thinks, that one of the most brilliant things that she's ever said and that she will ever say is that freedom is a constant struggle. because
Hello.
Because truly, and I don't even know if she meant it in this way, but truly arriving to freedom, arriving to liberation is a consistent struggle because it does not end until the world does. And that to me,
Brittany. I'm sorry.
That to me means that there has to be, that there cannot be a world capital W beyond this point. And that I genuinely believe in a place where society doesn't exist, in a place where we don't know this as the world, where we are not talking about community with the language community or society with the language society, where there is a freedom for folks who are not raced, so therefore are not Black and are not white and are not non-Black Latinx and are not Asian and are not all these different things, right? That are not man, that are not woman, that are not non-binary, that are not trans, that are not cis, that are not gay, that are not queer, that are not straight, that are not any of this. I believe in a world where we exist as beings, where there is no such box, no such prison that we are put in, that we are caged into, right? Maya Angelou said that she knows why the caged bird sings, and I do too, and it's because I want to be free from it. And therefore, I'm going to keep singing to be free from this cage that is all these things that we're boxed into that create the world that we know, that we live in this moment.
Is that what meant by that for real?
Oh, wow.
So, to the point of what have the police done, I'm gonna let Tasia move. The Morehouse man, Jordan speak, and then move to Tasia. But now that I think about it, the police have not done anything. The only time I have called is to get a police report so I can file an insurance claim. That's about it. That is for my car. That is for things that were allegedly stolen from my house. But that was about it. I guess some people will respond, I can hear that now, well, there's supposed to be a deterrent to keep people from doing it. And then I will ask, well, how efficient has that been when we still have things going on? I love that. Thank you so much for that, Deshaun. Jordan, Jatella.
Jordan, go ahead and drag
I think the funny thing is, I think that is perfect. I would ask a question in turn. I would say, what is your mutual aid network?
Now,
because that was my thesis.
Now,
come on, for the girls for back home, what is the mutual aid network? Is this what is
I'm
what
going
is
to
that?
give us the background so I
Come
can
on.
what it look like in praxis.
Go ahead, Jordan.
Come on, Jordan.
Wake the
By
girls
that,
up.
I mean, what are the, and I'm going to be very granular with it. What are the ways in which you have connected with others in your proximity and out of your proximity to hold you accountable, and that you can hold accountable to sustain one another, specifically in times of crisis and in times of emergency, in times of deep vulnerability. And what I've noticed is that the reason why people don't have an answer usually for that question is because the people that they are in community with, they do not trust to hold them up.
No.
That's the answer. Come on now.
And that has a lot to do with a thing that we can talk about another day, which is the ways in which most of our communities are circumscribed based on class, color, and status.
And what? Huh?
What was the middle word?
Class, color, status, and body. Just general embodiment, right?
Yes.
So I think that people...
The rocks will cry out.
So I think in order for people, I think there's a deep relationship between people's inability to see a world without police and people's lack of a community that they know and can call on and that they trust. And so I think that that is what needs to be discussed. Like I had recently tweeted, I didn't know that when my mom was sending me to the neighbor's house to borrow sugar, that she was developing a mutual aid community.
Come on, Kool-Aid.
That's auto-abolition. Like, that is eminently held in the ways in which Black people have had to move in order to sustain themselves, right? To make ways out of no ways, right? So I think that people do not look at those types of things, not only because, you know, it's not reified or thought of as deeply abolitionist, you know, as deeply world breaking, but also because they are not interested in being a borrower. They're not interested in vulnerability. People are not interested in being in community. They're not interested in being held accountable. So until people begin to be invested in having people around them that can hold them accountable and that can pull on their card and that can show up for them, that they will never understand the importance of living in a place without police, because the fear of being accountable is the desire to be self-possessed. It's the desire for individuality, and that is the necessary logic of capital.
Baby,
that's that burden.
Baby,
that's the burden.
I'm sick. Jordan.
Now Jordan got the cure.
Let me help you. You and
yes.
I love the piece about people not wanting to be borrowers, because that really gets us into, and we gonna go deep into it, but that is precisely the Christian part of this white ethno state, that we have to be lenders and not borrowers, that we're walking towards, we're ascribing to being the lenders and not the borrowers. And I've been rereading Fanon, and baby,
Bibles, baby.
Right. When he says that first chapter, when he says that, as we know, as the popular saying goes, the last shall be first. When I tell you, I screamed.
Right. No one wants that.
Nobody wants to deal with the antagonism.
Yeah.
They need new Bibles.
They need new Bibles. They need them.
New Bibles for the end of the world. I just, you know, the girls have been writing for centuries, for generations. Not just writing, we've been singing. We've been making film. We have been Black together in community. You have to flip what they have taught you is oppression into where beauty is. I think we are in a transitional space. New Bibles.
Yeah.
Transitional space. Transit don't always mean a train. I think I love that Jordan hit on the idea or the Black imaginary as tied to the Black Wall Street and the Sweet Auburn. I live in Sweet Auburn. Half my neighbors are homeless, and I'm a harm reductionist. And I know their names, and I'm out there. And when COVID-19 hit, I fed them food, and I gave them new crack pipes, because that's what mutual aid looks like to me.
Right.
Because it's not me saying you're not a proper being because you have no home, and while you have no home, how dare you choose to cope with substances? It's me saying I see you, and I'm gonna meet you where you at, and whatever I can do to make whatever situation you in accommodate where you're at, that's how we rockin'. What it looks like is the beautiful spaces that we have crafted as Black queer folks in places that reject us, like the university, like the white neighborhood, like every space in Atlanta that we don't curate for ourselves. You know, how many times have, you know, our networks jumped into action when the communal house didn't have lights on? So we threw a party in the front yard and we had lights the next day. me and my niggas have clothes swaps at the end of every season. Why? Because we know accumulation does nothing for us, for our spirit. Why do we need an excess of clothing? Why do we need an excess of anything? We have to go, the idea of Sweet Auburn that we have was never about the capital. It was never about the Black banks. It was never about the Black businesses. It was never about the Black millionaires that were made possible through this street. It was about the fact that after the 1906 race massacre, where white folks declare open season on niggas, Black folks said, we're not going to have our businesses next door to theirs. We're going to relocate all of them to one space. And everybody has a role in ensuring the safety, the accountability, that we have a world all our own. And I think what they don't teach you is the beauty of that world, that Black bank existed because white folks don't understand how to lend to Black folks. And, you know, you talk about folks don't want to be borrowers. That's all Sweet Auburn, that's all mutual aid has ever been about. And so I think we need to do, most Black folks that are married to capitalism don't know how to imagine it otherwise, you know, and it's sad, but there is hope for that. You want to talk about never calling the police. The only time I've ever called the police, I called the police chief on the police officers at an action that we were holding for houseless folks because he fucked up and George Turner gave me his cell phone number. His officers told us we didn't have a permit. I said, it's a protest. And then I called the police chief and the officers left. So there are ways around being that we already do, that we already sit in, that we've already curated. There are networks there. And I feel like that is the beauty of being Black. You know, the way urban studies tries to teach us is that we need to plan our way out of segregation, that we need to plan our way out of unevenness without abolishing capitalism, and that's not right. That we need to plan our way towards sustainability and resilience. Well, what is to say that the Black neighborhood is not what's already the most resilient thing about a city?
Right.
The very trap itself, the fact that niggas said, y'all say we don't have an economy, so we create an undercomment or an elsewhere economy that we trap in. It may be dealing dope or it may be like my auntie selling plates, but niggas are getting fed, communities getting made, and we don't have to fuck with that structure, what we know of as the city, what we know of as necessary and proper, what we know of as valuable and valued space. We don't have to fuck with that because there's inherent value in the way that we already create and the way that we already be together. So, I mean, at TPR Atlanta _ on Instagram and Twitter, the People's Response Atlanta is the group that I've been throwing down with ever since COVID-19 started. And there's not a need that has not been met that has come across our table that we as young Black Atlantans have not fucking made shake. From getting how many, you know, or AUC students home when the university shut its doors and said, y'all niggas on your own. You know, that was literally, you know, 2 Black women with the backing of a mutual aid network saying somebody needs $200 for a laptop, $100 for a plane ticket. Who on Twitter got it? And folks got home. That is the power of mutual aid, and that is the power of leaning on one another. I mean, we've remapped our neighborhoods. We are building. And when I tell you that shit has revolutionary potential, because now that we know each other, we have accountability for each other, we define safety as a collective community, you know, so that situations that happen to Toyin can't happen to anyone else, because at that action, that when we roll up as TPR, you know I've been up until 3 a.m., 4 a.m. every night this weekend, making sure all my niggas was in the house safely. Until everybody is home and accounted for, I'm not going to bed. I don't give a fuck if I'm not in the streets. That is mutual aid. And until everybody's willing to move past the limits or, you know, being desirable enough to be valuable enough to be policed, until we stop policing one another, hug each other, love each other, and become accountable for each other, we ain't gonna ever get free. But we're telling you, another world's possible.
Another world is possible. And I think one of the worst things that anti-Blackness stole from us, beyond our desire or ability to imagine, because I think imagination is one of the most powerful tools that any of us can have. But I think beyond that, I think it's that we don't give ourselves enough credit as Black folks for how we have imagined a better world for ourselves, even under anti-Blackness and capitalism. Like, I think so much about, I love T, you just used an example, and Jordan used an example earlier with the sugar. And I think so much about, even just outside of calling police, right? I think so much about how, you know, my neighbors growing up became my aunties.
Mm-hmm.
Them people weren't related to me.
Mm-hmm.
Those my aunts. And to this day, they my aunts. Because when my mama couldn't take me to school in the morning, my aunts did, right? When I couldn't get to a doctor's appointment, my aunts took me, right? Like, very much so, yes. It's like we create the communities that we need to sustain ourselves. I never had to call no police for a police escort to get me back to Morehouse's campus my freshman year, because I had a community of folks who were able to do that when I couldn't, right? I never had to be concerned about how I was going to, you know, deal with conflict, because I knew that I had people who would hold me down through conflict, right? And I think that we don't give ourselves enough credit. I just think so much about how Black women with limited resources, right? Black women making less money than white men, white women, and Black men, right? With limited resources, are out here raising kids in neighborhoods that are being gentrified daily with a limited income and a raised rent, right? Mm-hmm. But are somehow able to imagine ways to feed their kids every single day, are somehow able to imagine ways to be able to pay their light bills every day, right? Are somehow able to imagine ways to pay their gas bills and their water bills. And when they can't, imagine ways of being able to get those things back on, and imagining ways to get their bodies clean when there's no water, and imagining ways to get their kids' bodies clean when there's no water, and imagining ways to get light in the house when there is no light, right? Like, I think so much about my mom and what we navigated when I was younger,
maybe
lights off and homelessness and water off and all the things and the processes that we went through to make sure that there was water to flush the toilet, and that there was water to take a bath, and that there was enough light to make it through the house to find our own bed or to find our own pad on the floor, whatever it might have been. But there was ways to imagine, right? And we're doing this under a world that says that we cannot, and that was built specifically to kill us, right? And somehow still finding ways to survive every time. And I think because of that, we have not given ourselves enough credit for what we are able to do and what we can do when we don't have those barriers keeping us from being able to get to the other side.
Black folks have always lived in a constant state of emergency and chaos.
Yeah.
Black folks have never known stability. Black folks have always lived where it was thought of to be unlivable, or as Sylvia Wynter says, uninhabitable, in a zone that is torrid to the white gaze, in a space that is always inhospitable. We are the very, portal or vestibule through which the urban future continues to be realized. But when we say there is no urban future, because there is no more capitalism, because there is abolition, we got a whole lot of space that we can work with within these cities and beyond, using the very same practices that niggas have had from the Atlantic crossing to the plantation to the city to the slum to now. We've written the book.
And I just want to add, I'm not trying to have the last word, but I just want to say that this is why the work of Deshawn's work specifically, but our work in general, because I think all of us are thinking about questions of desire, is so important. Because what's at the heart of that, what's at the heart of that is developing a desire to not be a self-instituting, self-possessed person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and what we can't, and what is really, what another thing that I've been thinking about a lot is, what does it mean to cultivate a desire to be in community in that way? And I think that so much of capitalism, but fundamentally so much of anti-Blackness is a structure of desire, is a structure of cultivating the ways in which we see or want to see ourselves in the world or as a part of the world. And so we cannot imagine a way of being in the world that is not individualistic, that is not possessory, that is not invested in an extension of one's own capacity and labor power, right? So I think that we need to find a way, again, to rip off of Sylvia Wynter, how to desire not to be homo economist, like how to desire not to be the type of human being that conditions or calculates its capacity based on its labor power, that calculates its value based on what it can accumulate. How might we begin to cultivate a desire and a way of being that thinks about its being as conditioned by the well-being of the other?
Come on.
Well, like you did have the last point. Period. Okay, period. This is really good. Y'all have talked your ass off. I expect nothing less. But I know that people are going to enjoy this conversation. And Jordan, we appreciate you joining us. We haven't seen you in a minute, so we appreciate you coming to enlighten us on all of the things that we need to be enlightened on. LaShawn T, if y'all don't have anything else, we're gonna call it a night.
Thank y'all.
It's
always great being in conversation with y'all.
Yes, it is. Until next time, we'll talk to y'all later. Bye.